Before we start today's show, we want to congratulate two of the other MJBulls podcasts on their 1-year anniversary. Over the last 12 months, Hemp Barons and the Deadhead Cannabis Show have established themselves as premier cannabis podcasts, and we're proud that Larry Michigan and Jim Marty, the host of the Deadhead Cannabis Show, and Joey Beckerman, the host of Hemp Barons, trusted MJBulls to produce their shows and look forward to another great year. If you're not already listening, check out Hemp Barons and the Deadhead Cannabis Show at MJBulls.com, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now.
We are absolutely looking at stuff all the time. We think there will be a lot of opportunity coming out of COVID. But at this moment, our acquisition criteria is very strict. And so we may look at 20 businesses and proceed on none of them. But if they do meet our criteria, we are absolutely excited and would love to tackle it. So we do think there'll be a lot of opportunity coming out of this. They just have to meet our very strict criteria.
Today on Cannabis and Corona, we have another cannabis entrepreneur whose company is gaining momentum during the COVID-19 crisis. Our guest today is Justin Piercefrom Hydroponics Inc. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dan. Good to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Well, I'm glad to have you on. I mean, one of the positive consequences, if there is any, of this crisis is that it's starting to correct some of the inefficiencies, and it's speeding up economic evolution, I guess is the best way to say it. And I was anxious to speak with you today because as a one-stop shop, Hydroponic Inc. works with both the supplier and the grower. So you're really kind of in the middle of the cannabis supply chain. Can you start off by giving us your assessment as to how the crisis has impacted the different players within the chain?
I certainly will. So there have definitely been some negative effects here. There are material shortages on some supplies. The capital markets have dried up, so cultivators that have been struggling have been able to use kind of a backstop to help them get through kind of the embryonic stage of the build of their brand. Mm-hmm. Those have kind of dried up, so it's almost a survival mode at this point. Not because they can't cultivate what they want to cultivate, but because the support around the cultivation is somewhat compromised.
So that's at the supply end.
You know, the supply end obviously affects the grower. If the grower can't get the materials that he needs to grow the way he wants to, then he has to adjust. I kind of use the analogy of a builder, like a constructor. You're building homes. If you got stumped on one particular spot or one solution on fixing something, you wouldn't just walk away if you couldn't figure it out. You try another method. You try something else. That's the thing about the growers is there's so many different ways to cultivate. Mm-hmm. Everyone's got their special sauce. They've got their certain recipe they like to use. And if at a time some of those products that are part of your special sauce are available, you're not going to just walk away and not grow. You're just going to adapt and try to figure out a different product, a different complementary product, or even a different style that wouldn't have to use that product that you can't get.
Yeah, it's kind of back to what I said in the beginning, is it almost like evolution, or the growers couldn't get certain supplies, so they had to use other suppliers. If you were working with that supplier, it gives you an opportunity to expand to work with different growers.
It certainly gives you an opportunity to work with different suppliers and offer a more robust portfolio of options to our cultivators.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important. Now, you're in 15 states, D.C. and Puerto Rico. So, you were fortunate to already have scale to navigate this storm, but I bet a lot of smaller companies are really struggling with this. Are there going to be opportunities for you to work with these companies and possibly expand through acquisitions?
We think, after we get kind of through this COVID nightmare, we think there should be a lot more opportunity. It's a tough environment right now, and unfortunately not everyone will survive. And some people will be beat up and trying to exit. So we think there should be a lot of opportunity, on the back end of this thing.
Yeah, I do too. We talked earlier about you're putting together a fund to, maybe facilitate some of those opportunities. Can you give us a little bit more detail on that?
Certainly. So it's not a fund per se, but our investor group, our financial partners, it's a large, super well capitalized group, and they're absolutely more anxious to deploy more capital into this vertical. And we are absolutely looking at stuff all the time. We think there will be a lot of opportunity to come out of COVID. But at this moment, our acquisition criteria is very strict. Mm-hmm. And so we may look at 20 businesses and proceed on none of them. But if they do meet our criteria, we are absolutely excited and would love to tackle it. So we do think there'll be a lot of opportunity coming out of this. They just have to meet our, very strict criteria.
And as far as the investment, or would there be opportunities for other investors to participate in this, or is this kind of a closed group?
It's a closed group, but we would say if there was a big opportunity that our current group had interest, but not every single person in the group was into it, mm-hmm. we would open it up to a small group of friends and family.
One thing I found really interesting in your notes were back at the beginning of the crisis, your guys' sales just skyrocketed. And I think it says a lot about the industry and maybe being hopefully recession-proof. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question, Dan. So proof is a strong word, but I would say recession-resistant.
Okay.
Think about alcohol or nicotine. When times are good, people are drinking. Mm-hmm. When times are bad, people are drinking. It's kind of similar with cannabis. You celebrate, you lean on it. I mean, it's used in good times and bad. So yes, there was an absolute spike in our sales as COVID and the lockdown kind of launched. I think a lot of it had to do with just the uncertainty. Is Hydroponics Inc. going to be open next week? Is everyone going to be shut down? So there was a lot of mm-hmm. anxiety-driven purchases and let's load up because we don't know what the future is here.
But there wasn't a post-surge dip.
No, there wasn't a post-surge dip. No, not at all. It normalized, but there was certainly a spike on the outset.
Yeah. I've heard that in multiple interviews, that there was a surge and then it leveled back to where it was. So it was almost like the little bit of Christmas
right.
in early March.
So same thing with the cultivators. Dispensaries and stuff were way, way up at the beginning of COVID. I'm sure that has leveled off also. But same thing. I don't know if these dispensaries are going to be open. I got to load up.
Do you see that in a global scale? I know you work not just in the United States, but you see that globally?
Not as much yet. Maybe it hasn't trickled down yet, but not as much globally.
Okay. Well, we've been speaking with Justin Pierce from Hydroponics Inc., and you can find all of his contact information and information if maybe you want to talk to him about an acquisition. It'll all be in the show notes at MJBulls.com. Justin, thanks for being on the show today.
Dan, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate the invite.